Hey everyone, welcome. Welcome to today's session around meditative sketchnoting. It's really great to have you here. Thank you so much for making time in your day. And if you're watching this recording, we're really happy to have you along. All right, so the first thing that I want to talk about is sketchnotes and what they are. One thing that I wanted to bring to mind is that sketchnotes can be used for lots of things. This is something I've discovered over the last few years. And it's this idea that sketchnotes are not limited to just recording events that you're attending, if that's the way you've seen them. That I've been exploring lots of different ways that sketchnotes can be used to capture all kinds of information, even things that you're thinking in your head, which is what we're doing today. And I think it's important to remember that sketchnoting is just a way to capture your thinking on paper. It's ideas, not art, just like my sweatshirt. This focus on ideas, and it doesn't have to be art, and that you can simply use it to capture what's on your mind. So I think it's important to understand that, and we'll get a little bit into drawing in a little bit to show you what we mean about really simple drawing. But I think what I'll do now is I'll hand the microphone over to Ben. And I think what we're going to have Ben do is talk a little bit about mindfulness and meditation, and what mindfulness and meditation is about, how he uses it in his life. Ben uses it in his life to make his life better and to understand what's going on in his life. And so I'm going to switch over the cam to Ben, and Ben, take it away.
Excellent. Well, brief overview of mindfulness is what I want to start with. So I want to talk kind of about what mindfulness is, and then how to go about building or improving your ability to do mindfulness. So the first part, what mindfulness is, really two things that I think about. The first is an approach. And the approach is comprised of two things. First, here is really the curiosity, where your approach to life or the current moment. We'll talk about a few different ways that you can do mindfulness. The goal is to be curious about what you're seeing. And then the second is to have compassion. And often as you're starting, especially with mindfulness, the curiosity and the compassion need to be self-directed. You're trying to figure out how can I be curious about my own experience, and then how can I be kind to myself even in that experience. The other thing that mindfulness is a practice. And the practice is essentially one of recentering. So this small graphic that I drew here is, if the goal, if a straight line here would be kind of undistracted focus, where you're just thinking about one thing, that's not how our minds work. Our minds will always wander. So we'll start somewhere, we'll be thinking, it'll start going. And mindfulness is the practice of coming back to the center. So you often are choosing something intentional that you're trying to think about. And as we get into some of the hows, then we can discuss what you could do, but you're going to be distracted. And so you come back to center, and then you're going to start getting distracted again, and then come back, and over and over and over. That's the practice of mindfulness. So it's both this approach of curiosity and compassion, and then the practice of returning back to usually the present moment. And as we talk about how to build mindfulness, there are kind of two skills to think about or to focus on. And the first is to observe. And that observation is, again, we're gonna talk about mindfulness in this context as being self-directed. So you're trying to observe your thoughts and your feelings. So thoughts are going to happen, and you want to see, oh, what is it that I'm thinking here? Here's another thought that's come. Or what are the feelings that I'm having? And the goal is to distance yourself a little bit from them so that you are an observer. Just notice that they're happening. Then the other way to build mindfulness is to describe. So you start with observing, you notice what's going on, and then you try and describe it. And the goal here is to be accurate, not not perfect, but accurate and not exaggerated, where you're just trying to say, this is what I'm feeling, this is the sensation that I'm having right now, or here are the thoughts that I'm having. And what's important is no judgment. And this goes back to that compassion piece of the mindfulness approach, that when you're trying to practice mindfulness, when you're doing something in a mindful way, there's an acceptance. So there's an awareness and an acceptance where you observe what's going on, you're describing it, you're trying to distance yourself a little bit, and then you just accept whatever's coming up, how things are going. So meditation is similar but different from mindfulness. Meditation is really a mindfulness practice, and it is simply just a technique to be able to develop mindfulness. So as we think about what meditation could look like, the quintessential example, or what most of us think of, is trying to sit quietly, observe your thoughts. That can be hard for everyone, really, but there are certainly some of us who find that extremely difficult. Another form of meditation could be going for a walk, or and I didn't even draw this one before, but if you have an Apple Watch, and I did this just before we started because I was feeling pretty nervous as well. It has the nice breathe function. Just focus on your breath. You're just trying to meditate on something for a couple minutes. And then finally, doing something active. So some kind of drawing. And this is really what we're going to go into, is the process of meditative sketchnotes. And I think helpful for us to start with some examples. So we've got kind of two flavors of examples. One is processing things in the moment of this is what's going on. And I'm going to let Mike kick that off with a couple examples that he's done of kind of meditative sketchnoting in the moment.
So this one is a sample of a terrible loss for my team, the Green Bay Packers, to the Seattle Seahawks in 2014. They were headed to the Super Bowl, and with 5 minutes left, everything possible went wrong. You can see I was documenting the game as it went along, and at the very bottom, you can see that my things went quite wrong. The interesting thing about this wasn't so much the game itself or how I felt or any of those things, but more that I had a place to put my emotions. So I had lots of emotions. Anyone who follows a team, or you know, follows anyone and is cheering for them, you love when they win, and it's tough when they lose, right? So it was definitely tough, and you can see it as my handwriting starts to break down on the lower right page. But the thing was, afterwards, I felt a lot different than when I watched a game without doing this kind of documentation. I felt like I was putting my stress into the ink, and it was going on the page, and I could separate myself from it a little bit. I thought that was really fascinating at the time. Now this next one is another twist on sketch notes at football games. So in this case, I'm a Green Bay Packer fan, so I attended at their home field, which is Lambeau Field. And my thought on this was, rather than focusing on the game, what if I focused on almost everything except the game? So I started thinking, like, what was the space that I was sitting in on the bleachers, and I was glad that I bought this seat back for $6, and the hats that people were wearing, and what was my field view, and what were the foods that I ate that day, and some description, right? So it was me meditating on the experiencing of being at Lambeau Field. And really the only thing that talks about the game is in the top left, where I say who the teams are, and the bottom center where I'd list the score. You could see it was so unimportant that I even misspelled Falcons in that score box, right? I was much more focused on everything else around it. So it made it an interesting meditative practice just to be observant, to look around and see what it was.
This next example is one of mine, and this was actually the first the first recorded instance of Ben Norris doing meditative sketchnoting. The idea had come up over the summer as Mike and I had a chat for the Sketchnote Army podcast, and this was one morning I had gone to church with the family and recognized that I was starting to be overwhelmed by emotion, and almost got up and walked out and went home and left my wife with our 7 kids to manage there. But instead, I moved just a little away from the family, sat down, and just started trying to sketch what happened so far, and what am I feeling right now, what's going on. And as I did that, by the time I was done, I had calmed down, and you can kind of see that here. I actually kind of a meta sketch note had in the sketch note wrote, this is how I felt, then I did the sketch note, and now this is how I'm feeling. A different example, and this is just kind of paged through. I often will use my iPad, and just that one of the beautiful things about Apple Notes is you can start handwriting and it's just an infinite scroll. And so writing through, just kind of not verbally vomiting, because there's no verbal here, I'm just writing with my hand, but vomiting out my emotions of this is what's going on, this is what I'm feeling, some simple sketches in there, but just a way to kind of capture what's going on right in the moment.
Now, this is a sketch note of a food experience. So one of the things I believe are meditative, or at least reflective experiences are when I go to dinner by myself or with my family or friends, is to capture the experience of that meal. And so this was an example of visiting Charlotte with my wife. We went to a Thai restaurant, it was really great. I had my pocket brush pen, which I'd been practicing at the time. And I also had this little tiny pocket Baron Fig notebook, really small, pocket size. And if you know me, you know that I love constraints. So my constraint on this was I couldn't use color. I had to use this tiny book that I carried in my pocket. I carried nothing else but that pen and the book. And after dinner, I took pictures during the dinner, so I made sure to eat while it was hot. And then after dinner, I sat and reflected, talked with my wife about what we liked about the meal. And then I just drew from the pictures that I took and my memory what that experience was like. You can see, because I'm using a brush pen, like detail is not the important aspect of this sketch note. It's about the impression of the things we had, so we could remember and reflect, oh, that was so good. We really love this Thai food, because we hadn't had Thai food in months and months at the time. So it was a really great experience. And this is a way to capture that moment.
Awesome. One more that we wanted to show, this is kind of a different example, and this was more of a week in review, where I found myself at the end of kind of a rough week and was trying to think back, what contributed, what led up to this, and started just in the middle, the big text, writing, these were my emotions, this is what I was feeling. It started out with despair, tried to sit with things and work through with patience, and by the end was feeling some hope, and kind of in a circular manner, just started trying to process what were some of the pieces that led to this. So starting first with kind of a psychiatrist visit, these are some of the questions that I'm thinking of, and that was kind of how I was feeling. Now we're starting to make some changes. Well, now what? And that led to driving and starting to have some thoughts, making a phone call to my little brother and kind of settling things back down. I will, over the summer, would volunteer as a blacksmith in an old town pioneer recreation village here in Utah. And so I usually a very enjoyable experience. Um, but you can see I it wasn't working out. Started, it got frustrating. I left early. All of these things came together to make it so that my emotions were overwhelming, and figuring out how to deal with that um, was a challenge in the moment. And then as I looked back, it was a helpful experience to kind of reflect on the week as a whole and see, this is where I am, this is how things have gone, this is where I am finished at now. So that was kind of a helpful example for me. And um, hopefully those examples that we gave serve as something of a at least some ideas, some context for what are we talking about here? What could meditative sketchnotes look like for you? I'm going to turn it back over to Mike to talk through some of the basic drawing exercises. So whether you're I can see with the few cameras that we've got, some people look like they're already capturing some sketch notes. Hopefully some of you feel comfortable with that. I'm sure some of you also feel like drawing is not your thing, and Mike's definitely going to help with that.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for leading us through that, Ben. And now we're going to switch to really basic drawing. And what I'm going to do is switch to my iPad, and we'll just go through some really basic drawing techniques so that you can join us and have some confidence as you do the exercise. We wanted to prepare you. So if you're someone who's not drawn or you feel uncomfortable drawing, we're going to give you those skills today with just a couple of minutes. So I will share my screen here. So let's go to the 5 basic elements of drawing. I teach this a lot, and I teach it a lot because it's really valuable, and I think it helps people who want to understand how to draw things simply. Encounter lots of people who maybe stopped drawing when they were in their teens because someone was really good, or it was frowned upon by their teachers, or there's all different stories about why this might have happened. And so they come to drawing, and it's sort of a fear, almost like public speaking. And so one of the things I discovered is an easy way to get people into it was, what if we thought about drawing in a different way? What if we thought about drawing as 5 basic shapes? And the use of those is almost like taking Legos and stacking them together to make drawings that way. So it takes the pressure off of, sitting in a room and drawing still life, or trying to be perfect and do three-dimensionality and proportions and all those kind of things. It simplifies drawings and makes it simple. And so I boiled it down to these 5 elements. And what we're going to do today is I'm going to walk you through actually doing drawing with these in a simple way. And if you, hopefully you have your pen and paper along, I would invite you to come along and draw with me. So the concept that I teach is this idea that with these 5 basic shapes, the square, circle, triangle, line, and dot, you can use those in a simple way to add them together. So here's a house. I think if I were to draw a square with a triangle on top of it, that works pretty well for a house. Now, I can stop there. One thing you'll notice is there is something going on between the combination of the words and the image. That's what we're depending on. We're making use of this combination of those 2 things to support each other. So that's why sketchnotes have images as well as words, because they support each other. Now, we can, of course, add more detail. So what if I used a rectangle for the door, a line? Now I've got a window on the door. Use my dot, and I've got a doorknob. I can even put another window up in the attic. I can have a chimney coming off the roof. And then finally, out of that chimney, I can do a wiggly line. And now I've used 4 of the 5 elements to build that simple object. So as you can see, it's a little bit of a game to see how can I use those 5 objects to produce the thing that's either in my head or it's something that I'm looking at. In this case, a lot of what we're going to be talking about are things in our heads, things we're thinking about, things we're feeling and experiencing. So this is a really easy way to capture those things in simple objects. The second one I'll show you is a book. So a book, I could probably get away with just a rectangle with a line down the middle. That would be enough, especially with the word below it. Again, you see how these are working together. One of the cool things you can do though is you can add more detail. So I can draw a line below and connect it up. And now suddenly your mind sees dimensionality. It sees pages, right? It's interpreting. So one of the things that we also rely on in addition to words is this idea that your mind actually fills in the blanks where things don't exist or it seems like they're a pattern. That's the benefit of pattern recognition. We can use that to our advantage. So as an example, I can draw some lines on the left page, and now that's representing, my mind might say, hey, that's text on the page. That's really cool. And maybe on the right, I've got a square. Maybe there's a triangle in it, and that's a mountain. And then maybe there's another couple of lines of text. And now I've got a little more detail. You know, it's clearly not a detailed, perfect drawing of a book, but it is the concept or the metaphor of a book, and it helps you communicate that idea to others or to remember it yourself. Now the next one I'll show you is coffee, and you might be thinking, oh, coffee cups, we're going to do circles and proportions and perspective. My argument is, if you're new to this especially, stay two-dimensional because it's just easier and faster. Why couldn't you draw a coffee cup from the side like this, right? And then maybe there's a little part on the bottom so it can stack on another coffee cup. And then finally, we're getting to our circle. So I've got a half circle and then another one inside. And now I've got a handle on this coffee cup. I can even use the line and use my squiggly lines like we did for the chimney to suggest there's vapor. So this is hot coffee. And the cool thing again is you're just using this two-dimensional look from the side to produce this cup. Now if you're a tea drinker, you can just take that word out and write tea or whatever hot drink you wish, and it still works because you can't really see the liquid inside. It's representational. So again, you've got this really simple way of building objects that lets you get into getting your ideas down without worrying so much about them being beautiful or perfect. It's idea creation. So here's another one. I think everyone probably knows how to draw a heart. Really what it is, it's, you know, two circles and a curved triangle. So I guess if I broke this down, you would see, you know, two circles like this and then, you know, a line like that. We're just representing it. So thinking of it that way can be helpful. And then finally, the last one I think that's relevant to today is we're going to have thoughts. So going back to good old comics, which I loved growing up, here's a thought bubble, right? It's sort of a cloud. At some point you have a circle on top of it, and then these get connected, and that goes to the person. And then you connect them up. So really it's just curves out of the circle and a few circles. Really simple. And then, you know, then I can write something in there. Hello, maybe I'm unsure of the person who I've just met today, right? So these are the 5 basic shapes in action. They're very simple, and the best way to think about it is how few objects can you use to get your point across. That not only speeds you up, but it helps you think through the things you want to create. All right, so the next thing I'll show you in our little sampler is simple lettering. So first is 2-line lettering, and I'm going to show you how to do 2-line lettering with Ben's name because it's nice and short. And I'm going to show it to you in lowercase. This can be uppercase as well. So if you want to follow along, just write Ben with that single line lettering. The idea of 2-line lettering is that you simply do a parallel line next to the line you've drawn. In this case, the parallel line I've decided will be on the inside of the B. And I do that because I want the height of the B to not get taller, right? Because the B has been defined. Now on the E, it gets tricky. So what I'm going to do is I'll put the second line on the inside of E, but because I know I have space, I'm going to put the second line on the back side of the E because I know that's lining up. And then the second line on the bottom of the E is below. So you see you can decide which side the line goes on based on the space you have available. That's kind of a nice feature. And then for the N, let's do the second line on the outside of the N. And I think on this side, because I want the height to stay the same, I'll put the line on the inside. So you can see you're just following a parallel line, which is a lot easier than trying to guess those lines. You're just watching them. And then the last thing to do is to cap it, the ends off on all these objects, and then fill it in with color, whatever color you happen to be using. You may notice in mine that there are little white marks, I like leaving those in there. I like them because it makes it look like a person drew it, and I want to be reminded that this is not a typeface. This is drawn by a person. So once you fill it in, now you can look for things you want to correct. Now, of course, I'm slowing this down a lot to show you the concept. When you start getting up to speed with this, it can go actually really quickly. Right, so maybe I'll clean some of these edges up, and now we've got the letters Ben, and it's got a nice boldness to it. Now the 3 line is very similar, and I'll show this to you with a single character, the character H. So if you want to follow along, draw your H with single line. Just like the 2 line, there's a line on one side. But unlike the 2 line, there is a second line on the other side. So you can see, after I cap it off, that you're almost building a structure. So what you realize is you're building a structure that nobody but you knows about. That's the greatest secret ever, right? And now I can go in here and color it in. I can fill in that space. And then once it's filled in, I can look for any corrections I wish to make, right? But look how much bolder that letter form is. It's just a really quick way to do bold letter forms. Another thing I'll mention about this 3-line method is it consumes a lot of space, so you have to plan for it a little bit more than 2-line. It's something to be aware of if you plan to use this in the exercise that we go through. But it can be really great for initial caps, like in an old book where you see a big letter form before the text. If you want to do that, that's a great way to do it. Now the last thing I'll show you today are faces with emotion. And my friend Austin Kleon, who, if you don't know who he is, please go check him out. He does such great work. He's got 3 wonderful books, starting with Steal Like an Artist. He has a newsletter that he's running, and he gave me this approach to thinking about faces that I'm going to share with you today. So what I'd like you to do is on your page, don't worry about the bars on the outside. Those are just referenced to help me remember. I want you to draw 9 squares. And they don't have to be perfect squares. Something like this. So 3 across, and then 3 down. You can see mine are all varying a little bit, which is fine. It's really about the concept and not about the execution. So I've got my 3rd one in the bottom row. So now I have 9 squares. You can see they're not even aligned exactly right. Doesn't matter. The next thing I'd like you to do is inside each one of those squares, draw like a half triangle. That's the nose. And then 2 dots for eyes on either side. Again, these do not have to be perfect. They should be roughly in the center of that square, because you're going to need the space above and below for eyebrows and a mouth. And the thing that's really interesting about this exercise is, again, it goes back to our ability as humans to recognize patterns. Our brains are wired and designed for this. It's how we identified things moving, out in the fields, right? So we could chase them or to be aware of danger. So I'll give you just a minute to catch up if you need it, to put your nose and eyes inside your squares. You should have 9 squares, 9 noses, and 18 eyes, I guess. And so the interesting thing was that Austin taught me was, if we just do 3 different shapes for the eyebrows and the mouth, so you can get 9 different emotions. So let's do that. Starting in the top left, let's just do the eyebrows first, and we'll leave the mouths to reveal. I'm going to make all of the eyebrows a straight line going down in this direction. We'll go to the next row. We'll go down in this direction. We'll do the smile, or the curve up, whatever you want to call it. I guess I call that the angry row. And then now we'll go to the 3rd row of faces that we're building, and we'll do the frown face, or the down curve. And you'll see that even now those 3 rows already have some kind of an image that's coming to your mind. That it's an angry row, or a sad row, or a neutral row. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go horizontally using the same characters. So the first one will be the line for the mouth. So here you can see that's probably the most neutral of the faces. Now let's go to the next one. So this is kind of an angry person. Even the neutral mouth doesn't seem to change that perspective. And then finally, the last person with the straight mouth is a sad person. So let's go to the next row. We're going to go to this row and go horizontally again. And here we'll use the smile. So here's a normal, happy person. A little bit more than neutral. Let's go to the next one. Now this person looks like they're looking for ways to cause trouble, right? Their eyebrows are angry, but they're smiling. That makes you wonder. And then finally, you've got, I guess, the person that's ready for happy hour, right? Who's or maybe is in happy hour, looks a little bit silly. Now we're going to go to the last row and again go horizontally. And now we're going to do the frown. So here we have the sad person, clearly sad. This person looks really angry. All we did was change the mouth. If you compare these two, look how much angrier that last one looks. And then finally, we got the real sad person in the lower right. Interestingly, when this was presented to some nurses, and I think Michael Clayton was along with me, my friend Michael, when nurses saw this, they totally loved it. They loved the idea of using this on their whiteboards that they have in the room for each patient to be able to identify for the next person coming on shift what the mood of the person was in that room. So as you can see, this is just a little exercise to show you that simple objects can help you identify. And the reason it works is because our minds are built to recognize patterns, and that simple things don't have to be perfect, and we fill in the blanks. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and we're going to switch back to the exercise. So this is a great time to be here. Hopefully everyone's ready to go. And Ben, I'm going to hand this back over to you and let you take over. I'm going to spotlight you.
So the exercise that we're going to go through, I'm going to tee it up, explain it just a little bit, and then invite all of you to join us in doing a meditative sketch note. So a couple principles, or I guess the point that we want to start with is when there are helpful forms of introspection and there are less helpful forms. And one of the keys is, instead of asking why, which often is our natural instinct, if things are going poorly, we say, why me? Why did this happen? Why is all this going on? And instead, if we focus on what, then this can be more helpful. So what we're going to try and think about are three questions. First is, what happened? Second is, what do I feel? And third is, what now? And when we go to start the actual exercise, we'll put this up to help us remember what we're trying to focus on. But by moving in these ways, I've found this to be really useful for me. Often, the moment when I recognize that I need to do something like this, I'm highly emotional. Something's happened. I'm feeling overwhelmed. And often, because my emotions are high, it's hard to focus on the emotions. But if I start first with what happened, just factually, what has led up to this, what's going on, then I can look at, what am I feeling? And that gets back to what we were talking about earlier with the observe and describe. Just try and identify, what is it that I'm feeling, and what and try and have a description about that. This last question, I don't always include, but I think it's helpful to say that the point of doing this exercise is often to try and move myself forward in a way. So I wanted to just show you an example. And ironically, as we were preparing for this, I had this opportunity come up last week. Friday morning, got up, my wife and I had been planning a trip for a while, and we woke up, whoops, sorry about that. The dangers of using a touch device. Let me share again. We woke up to have, there we are, our child in our room coughing. And that is what woke us up that morning. And I immediately thought, oh no, this is ruined. We've been planning this trip for a while. We actually had to postpone it a month ago because things didn't work out. And so this was what I started with. This morning, what happened? And as I sat in that, I realized that part of what was contributing was that this had happened before, where a few months ago, we started having this plan, we discussed it, we said, let's make a date, we had a date, and then as we got to the date, we found we are not good. Are we good? No, it's time. We thought we had kids lined up. People were not available. So as I went through that progression a month ago of realizing what is it that's going on, I processed some of that emotion, realized there was a lot of pain, and through that was able to make a new plan. Well, that new plan was this morning, where again we had a child coming in sick. We thought everyone was just about better, and so I was sitting there thinking, how are we going to approach this day? So I turned next to what am I feeling, and recognized that there was a lot of pain, there was uncertainty, and felt like my heart was breaking a little. I had really been excited and looking forward to this, and there was a lot of disappointment, and then there was also a lot of stress and anxiety. And this I don't always do this, but this method of identifying feelings and locating them is is a tool that I've gotten from therapy, something that is often helpful in seeking to move to that mindful state of being able to observe and describe, is to locate. So what am I feeling? There was pain, there was uncertainty, there's anxiety, and where is it? And as I can identify where I'm feeling those things, then it provides a little bit of distance. Finally, I ended with, what now? How am I going to move forward? And realized we could make some plans. We may stay home. We may still be able to go somewhere. We may not be able to go. But the action to take was to make some phone calls and to find out, is grandma still willing to babysit a child who's sick? And it all kind of hinged on that. And if that was going to work out, then maybe we could move forward. And it turned out to be just fine. In the end, grandma said, sure, bring him over. We can throw him in a room and they can recover as they're there. And so I finished this sketch note, saved it, went downstairs, got the kids breakfast, and started moving throughout the day. So it's not exactly a magic pill, but this approach was really helpful. And because I had this on my mind, we were preparing for this workshop, and I knew I want a good example to show, and then life handed me the moment for it. So we went through this, and I just want to use that as kind of the tee up. So again, we're going to take a few minutes now, and the goal is for you to think through those 3 questions. And we want to think about what happened, what are you feeling, and what now? And Mike's going to put on some music for us. He's going to run a timer. We're going to aim for 7 to 10 minutes or so that we can wrap up, have a little bit of time for Q&A. Mike and I are planning to stay on the Zoom after the top of the hour for anyone who is able to and wants to stick around. But our goal is to be done at the top of the hour and still have some time for questions and answers. So pull out your pen and paper, whatever you've got. Remember those techniques that Mike talked you through. Mike will tee up some music, and we'll get started. I went to look at, what was this morning like for me? Part of it was just getting ready for this. So thinking, this was the point that I got to where I was feeling scattered. Too much was going on. I was trying to do too many things at once. And as I thought about what led to that, a lot of it was uh, too full of a schedule over the last little bit. Had was really looking forward to this one thing. Even got ready to go to bed early last night to make sure that I can kick this cold, and then just laid in bed. I was telling Mike this for almost an hour. Whoops, sorry about that. Just trying to think of how am I going to share best from the iPad? How can I make this go as well? And to the point where breakfast was really a challenge this morning. Um, and this is kind of what helped me today. And when I think about what now, that's kind of what I want to think about. Try and do one thing. If I can focus on one thing at a time, that's going to allow everything to just simmer down a little bit.
Hmm. That's always good advice, and I often will come back to needing to do one thing, right? Just one thing at a time. So Ben, someone is asking to have you share your screen again with the drawing.
Oh,
I want to see your
sure.
drawing again.
Great. Yeah, let's pull that right back up.
And then, so here's a question from Madeline. Do you go back and refine sketches later in the day if you don't capture it all? In other words, maybe leaving space for additions, like how things maybe resulted or something like that.
I'd answer that in two ways. One would be if I was taking sketch notes of this session as an attendee, then I would be more inclined to leave space and go back to add things
Mm.
that I might remember after. For the process or the exercise that we did, trying to do a mindfulness sketch note, and whatever you capture in the moment, that's enough. That's all that is really needed there. So I think um, for more conference type sketch notes, sometimes I will refine later. My personal preference is to try and be done and done. So as the speaker finishes, sometimes I'll go back in and add some color in the end. But if I'm attending a conference and there's a break after the talk, 5 or 10 minutes into the break, I'm done with the sketch note and I'm never going to touch it again. I just export it out. And for me, the process is more about what can I do that's live. Uh,
I can sort of make a comment too that I really like. There's something about one and done. Mike Clayton in the chat said, "One and done is the only way." There's something I like about being done with it. Like the challenge I find is if I feel like I can always go back and modify it, like it's never totally done. I can't just move on to the next thing. There's always a thread pulling on me, right? So there's something I really like about sort of setting a container and saying, in the case of a talk, right? I want to kind of mostly have it done in the talk, and maybe I give myself 15 minutes to check for typos and such, of course. But there's sort of a finish point, and then I'm done with it. And there's something about closure that is really helpful, right? But there may be times, maybe for you, maybe there's in your journal, maybe there's a running commentary. It could be really interesting to just have page after page where you just continue day by day to add more thinking, and then when you go back to reflect on it, you could start to identify that flow that's happening over time. That could be an interesting way to look at it. So I would say there's no necessarily right answer. I think the right answer really depends on your needs and your use. Thank you so much for everyone coming. It's really great to have you all. Thanks for the kind comments. Ben, any parting thoughts that you'd like to share?
um, just real quick, there was one question someone asked in the chat of the questions to go over the what's. What happened? What do I feel? And what now? Um, and and I think that my last thought on this was is as Mike and I have thought about and done and talked about sketchnoting a lot, often the the best use of sketchnoting is to improve something in your life. So whatever might be happening already, um, if you're attending church, start doing church sketch notes. If you go to conferences, do conference sketch notes. If you're reading and trying to remember what you're reading, and that was kind of what this was born out of was many of us know about or want to know more about mindfulness and meditation. And we recognize the importance of mental health these days. It's something that I think and talk and write a lot about. And finding a way to marry those two together, I think, is something to unlock potential in your life. Find something that you enjoy doing, find something that you want to do, and see how you can put those together. So I think this is an important and exciting thing for us to share because it's helped. It's been a nice thing in our lives, and I know for myself this has become an important part of every week and even days when I find myself feeling overwhelmed. This is a great tool to be able to turn to and hope that you can practice, take out of it what fits for you. I really loved the comment that Elizabeth made of thinking about the faces and having a simple 3 by 3 grid, those 9 faces to express emotion, and then locating and identifying emotions. Whatever those were for you out of today or out of whatever you hear, hope that you're able to grab something and improve your life with it.
Thanks you, Ben. Thanks for guiding us and being a leader and providing this additional way to enter into mindfulness. I think the thing that I think about is as mindfulness has grown is it's often seems hard to get, like, where do I start? Like, and I've, practiced sitting, using apps, all kinds of things. And I think if you're someone who tends to do doodling and drawing, and that's something important for you, that this might be that way in, right? You're always looking for the way in to make it relevant so that you can use it. So I kind of found that this ability to kind of cross over mindfulness and drawing, because so many times I've felt like I was in a mindful state when I've done sketchnoting or drawing of any kind. So why not leverage that and make it, make that the whole purpose? So this has been great to see the actual how to do it. What are the questions you ask? How do you do it? Watching you do it, seeing the output really helps people to form an idea around what they can do and how it could fit into their lives. So thank you so much for spending all the time you have to prepare for this and to share your knowledge with everyone. And I just hope that everyone appreciates, and I'm sure they do appreciate all the work that's been done, and that it's useful. That's really ultimately what we're doing. We're here to help you, and we're here to share because this is how we become better humans. Thanks a lot for your time.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.